Sir. Incógnito do colégio, Sir Peter Marques falando, e vamos para mais um Assistindo Porcaria Posicionamento, questionável webcam 8, 4 de 3 de 2025. É o segundo dia. Eu não vou jogar hoje. Sexta-feira vai ter live de ban, é isso. Acabou, foda-se. Para de cantar uma música de údio, caralho. E vamos ativamente encontrar porcaria. Só. Acho que tem alguma coisa no histórico. Tem mesmo esse vídeo aqui.
Calor no carnaval? Se recupere com a refrescância gigante do Engove Africa Pink Lemonade.
ClickUp is an all-in-one project management tool that can literally do anything, and I mean anything. Use it.
Ou que houvesse uma mensagem política, então é com...
O Cato, já falei que eu não quero essa porra de dublagem de A, caralho.
The scab burqas have mostly been viewed as a way of appreciation for this religious garment as beautiful and elegant, in contrast to the general Western perception of burqas, which usually does not perceive it as such. However, June's version of the garment is see-through, which completely undermines the purpose of the burqa, which aligns with his comments about gender discrimination. Ultimately, I don't think it's ever going to be clear if June was critiquing Islam in some form or not, but I think it's safe to assume that the popular explanation of the use of burqas as a complex response to 9/11, which most modern articles claim, has likely been derived and morphed from his anti-war statement and subsequent interpretations of fashion critics. It is not a be-all end-all explanation and could even be false. Just to reiterate, I am not trying to claim I have unveiled Takahashi's true intentions with the burqas, but instead to point out that the popular explanation is actually a bit of a grey area and presents some possible alternatives based on June's actual words. Take all of this with a grain of salt. I am not a journalist, and if you know of any more resources that add more context or even disprove everything I've just said, then please leave a comment. Burqa investigation tangent aside, Scab was an incredibly impactful collection. It's also clear that June was incredibly tapped into the crust punk scene, as many of the genre's references throughout the show were too specific and niche for him to simply be appropriating the subculture without any knowledge or real appreciation for it. One example is the invitation card for the Scab runway show. Printed very faintly over a photograph, you can see the cover of Glaswegian crust punk band Sedition's 1993 album Earthby. The original release of this record came in a screen-printed Hessian sack, which was also referenced by June in this collection. The band's vocalist, Angus Quinn, stated in an interview with Sanctus Propaganda that cultural identity is an important part of any society. It grounds you, gives you a place, a meaning, a sense of belonging, in reference to the use of Celtic art in the band's visuals. This appreciation of cultural identity aligns with June's words in ID magazine, where he said, "I wanted to mix cultural and ethnic stuff to make humans equal for once," which likely explains why he specifically chose to reference sedition. Of course, Undercover isn't the only Japanese label famous for utilizing punk aesthetics around the 90s and 2000s. Junya Watanabe is known for incorporating the punk aesthetic into his work, which pairs very well with his mastery of deconstruction. Takahiro Miyashita's brand Number 9 is also heavily inspired by the American Pacific Northwest grunge scene, which is technically a subgenre or offshoot of punk. Takahiro visited Portland in his youth, which is where he gained such a love for the genre and was specifically very inspired by Kurt Cobain. Grunge fashion has parallels with the punk look, as both have a focus on distressed clothes. Before we progress into some more modern examples of punk in fashion, we have to quickly take a trip to a different country, also known for its output of influential designers. Towards the end of the 20th century, Belgium was just shitting out groundbreaking designers. Seeing as this video is specifically about punk, we unfortunately won't be talking about this bloke called Mason, but we will be kicking it off with the chronically online male fashion fan favourite, Raf Simons. Born in Belgium in the late 60s, Raf grew up during the golden era of punk, and as a result became a big fan of the music and was involved in his local punk rock scene. For the most part, the connection to punk in Raf's work was through references to famous punk and post-punk bands, and would mostly come in the form of very blatant graphics, but there were some exceptions to this. To be honest, I don't think there's much more to unpack here, and let's be real, enough people on the internet have yapped about the significance of Raf's Autumn-Winter 2001 Riot collection, so let's just move on, as there is another Belgian fashion designer with a far more unique connection to the punk genre. Anne de Meulemeester is a designer whose eponymous label was founded in 1985 and is also famous for being a part of the Antwerp Six. If you don't know who that group is, they are basically like the Avengers for insufferable nerds who are interested in fashion instead of superheroes. Her designs are famous for being elegant yet dark, and she is also one of the most highly regarded designers in the industry. The classic or UK punk look is definitely not what Anne is famous for referencing. However, the punk scene as a movement did influence her to some degree, especially in her early years while she was still a student. She said in an interview for Index magazine, "Punk had just started in London. Because Belgium is right in the middle of Europe, we felt its influence immediately. I was so inspired by punk. It made me feel revolutionary and strong. That has stayed with me." The majority of Anne's work is clearly inspired by proto-punk, post-punk and goth, which, surprise surprise, is also an offshoot of punk. However, what's unique about Anne is that one artist in particular has always been a muse for her. At the age of 16, Anne spontaneously bought a record of Horses by proto-punk artist Patti Smith after it caught her eye in the window of a local record shop. She listened to it and felt a deep connection between herself and the artist. When I was beginning to draw and make clothes, I tracked her down, which was not an easy thing to do, but I sent her a package. Patti Smith would recall, "Out of nowhere, one day comes this package.
Totalmente diferente de tudo que eu tinha visto.
Eu não esperava que fosse tão emocionante.
This exquisitely wrapped package, tied with black ribbons, and I opened it and found 3 beautiful white shirts inside, and I thought, whoever made them, whoever this person is, really understands me. It really felt as though they were made for me, and in a way, they were. The cover of Horses really set the tone for Anne's career in terms of the aesthetic. The dark, moody, and androgynous look is something we can see explored throughout her work. This did not turn out to be a one-sided parasocial fan situation like that of a Twitch streamer and their top donators. Patti Smith has claimed that she and Anne became not only friends, but sisters too. Since I began performing again after that first gift, I have never gone on stage without wearing a piece by Anne. All of Anne's clothes are significant. A jacket, a vest, a shirt, they are such a part of me. They make me feel confident, they make me feel truly like myself. Patti Smith would also say this about the Horses album cover regarding Anne. "When I look at it now, I never see me, I see us," which is a nice full circle moment. This section hasn't been massively relevant to the main focus of this video, as Anne de Meulemeester's work doesn't really exude punk in the same way that, say, Vivienne Westwood or June Takahashi's work does. Yes, her muse is sometimes referred to as the godmother of punk, but Patti Smith has said she doesn't think of herself as a punk. However, in the same way punk has branched out and influenced so many different genres of music and artists that aren't even recognizable as punk anymore, the same could be said with fashion, with this being an example. I also think a relationship like that of Anne de Meulemeester and Patti Smith is almost unheard of. Anne was initially just a teenage fan, but went on to influence and make up part of Patti's identity. Bar Vivienne Westwood, pretty much all the designers mentioned in this video follow the same formula of being a fan of punk bands and music artists and then using that as inspiration for their clothing collections, which go on to be influential within the confines of the fashion world. Anne de Meulemeester, on the other hand, was inspired by an artist and then went on to influence said artist. Alright, now that you're caught up on a brief history of punk in the fashion industry, where does it stand in the modern era? Obviously, a lot of the designers I've mentioned are still working in the present, or at least their eponymous brands are still in operation, but what else is there to see from younger talent? This leads us to a very unique brand, Enfant Rich de Prime. Yeah, if you think I'm doing the French accent, you can suck your mum. This brand's name translates to depressed rich kids and is known for ridiculous pricing and has with good reason been labelled as elitist punk and exemplifies
Tá mais pra bosta poser mesmo.
the crux of the subject that this video seeks to unpack. Henry Alexander Levi is the founder and creative director of the brand.
Esse é o poser.
He grew up in a world of wealth and opulence and attended multiple elite private boarding schools such as Institut Le Rosey in Switzerland. From a young age, Henry has been obsessed with punk, and the attitude of the subculture would inspire his behaviour throughout his teens as he was consistently kicked out of the expensive schools he was sent to. He would also develop issues with substance abuse, which landed him in an expensive rehab surrounded by depressed rich kids, which, as you can guess, helped inspire the brand, which was founded in 2012. It should be obvious to everyone that being born into the top 1%, enjoying a lifestyle that most people can't even fathom, and then claiming yourself to be a punk is questionable. He explains why he feels he is connected to punk in a complex interview, saying, "I'm angry at my parents for sending me to this place for a fucking year. I'm angry at the fucking people in the rehab for telling me what to fucking do all the time. I'm angry at my teachers and principals for kicking me out of every school I go to and not understanding me. That was for me my relationship with punk and that attitude." Henry clearly believes that this feeling is something unique to him. Apart from maybe the rehab stuff, this is what we call teenage angst, which is a common phase that most people go through in some form, but to Henry, he deemed this to be a groundbreaking form of rebellion and a way of authenticating his connection to a subculture which he proceeded to commodify. He's so obsessed with being authentic that it just comes across as him being insecure and painfully unauthentic. Yes, you can argue that he's not shying away from the contradiction of what he's presenting via the name of the brand, the egregious pricing strategy, and how he is open and sometimes obnoxiously proud of his privilege. But does that make him authentic, especially in the context of punk? This just reminds me of the age-old method of making sure no one can truly put you down or ridicule you for your insecurities by making sure you point them out and ridicule them first. Think of the stereotypical fat kid who makes loads of fat jokes about themselves. Does that mean they are happy about being fat? Is that a display of authenticity? I don't think so. The thing about ERD is that it could still exist, but instead of Henry needing validation as a real punk, he could simply reference the subculture like literally every other punk-related high fashion designer does. But that's not enough for him. He needs to be perceived as authentic. This isn't even a punk attitude at all. Like, surely he would just be unfazed by being labelled as inauthentic and just get on with it. Instead, he likes to talk about how authentic he is in interviews, which, yeah, is 100% something that someone known for authenticity would do. The way I live and what I do in my day-to-day, it feels like it's completely authentic. I want it to be understood. To add insult to injury, he also shits on other brands for doing what he shamelessly does with ERD. You see Diesel and all these brands doing these mock punk jackets, and they look super pussy.
E esse poser faz o quê, caralho?
These aren't kids in the streets going to shows. These are people having a meeting about trying to make a line that looks punk. It's ridiculous. He can't even answer the most basic questions without being insufferable. In an interview with Vogue Italy, he's asked what his birth date is, which he responds with July 14th, 1991, the same day as the storming of the Bastille, which just comes across as him trying to convey himself as some sort of prophet of rebellion by associating himself to such a pivotal part of the French Revolution. You might say I'm reaching a bit with this one, but normal people born on that day don't bring that up unprompted when asked for their date of birth, and I know that for a fact, seeing as I was also born on the 14th of July. The only time I would ever mention it is to point out that if I lived in France, I would always have a day off on my birthday, seeing as it's a national holiday there.
Uau, meu aniversário é no Dia Nacional da Doação de Órgãos. Dia do encanador e instalador hidráulico. Não, tá. Cadê? Não. Eu queria jogar nessa parte aqui em específico. Dia Nacional do Idoso. Tá, não importa o que preciso. Aqui. Comemoração da emoção política da cidade de Piritiba, da Bahia, e comemoração da emoção política de Cacimba, de dentro da Paraíba. Tendo como acontecimentos importantes no dia 27 de setembro, como quando o exército Guilherme Conquistador partem da foz do Rio Somme, iniciando a conquista da Normânia da Inglaterra, a Batalha de Plaus, que é travada entre a Polônia e a Ordem Teutônica, é alguma coisa alemã, né? Certeza. Eles são derrotados, o cerco de Viena, que começou quando Solimeu I atacou a cidade, o início da Loyola, fundada a ordem religiosa da Companhia de Jesus sob a direção do Papa Paulo III, quando o Papa Urbano VII morre 13 dias após como Papa, quando os exércitos da Suécia são derrotados pela comunidade polaco-lituana na Batalha de Kirkland, quando os venezianos entregaram a fortaleza da Cândia aos otomanos, encerrando o cerco da Cândia aos de 21 anos da Revolução Americana, Lancaster, Pensilvânia, tornou-se a capital dos Estados Unidos por um dia após o Congresso evacuar a Filadélfia. Da Assembleia Nacional da França votando para conceder cidadania plena aos judeus, da Guerra Peninsular, da Batalha do Bussaco, não foda do caralho, hein? Onde o exército anglo-português impõe uma pesada derrota aos invasores franceses. Em 1811, quando a Guerra Peninsular, o combate da aldeia da Ponte. Tá, coisa pra caralho. A mais recente é terrorismo israelense, ó. Que Israel bombardeia a capital libanesa Beirute, ó, que terrorismo israelense ano passado. No dia do meu aniversário. Fala sério, um paísinho de merda. Aqui, dos nascimentos, essa pessoal aqui. Aí aqui. Aí entre aqui nessa sessão eu nasci. Caralho, eu faço aniversário mesmo dia que eu o Levinho e o Diogo Elefante. E o Danilo Gentili. E o Denis Carvalho, o Thomas Nash, o Capciolo, não sei quem é esse cara. Olha isso. Eu tenho a mesma idade que essa esgrimista italiana. Caralho. É isso. É aqui o pessoal que morreu no mesmo dia que eu nasci. Será que tem alguém que, tipo... Tá. Ninguém importante morreu exatamente no mesmo dia que eu nasci, como dá pra ver aqui, ó. Ninguém importante... Caralho, o Cliff Burton morreu no dia 27 de setembro. Sabia, não? Não, falando assim, ninguém morreu, tipo, ninguém famoso morreu no dia 27 de setembro de 1999.
But then I would have to live in France, so I definitely dodged a bullet with that one. I can understand why Henry wants to be perceived in this specific way, because individuality and authenticity are like social currency within the world of fashion. This is true with both fashion designers and fashion consumers, and has been amplified by the advent of social media. For decades it was considered cool to be on trend, but now everyone wants a specific and unique personal style. It's so common for people to hate on trends for the sake of it being trendy, and I think that is why we have all these cores now, because people want to artificially equate more meaning to trendy clothing items. It's not eclectic grandpa core, it's just wearing a cardigan. It's funny how this yearning for individuality and authenticity has been hijacked by platforms such as TikTok and has resulted in micro-trends in disguise as lifestyles or subcultures. Anyway, before we go any further, I just want to make it known that from a purely fashion design perspective, I don't think ERD is terrible or anything. Look at some of their most recent runway
a fucking
collections and
poser.
campaign shots and you'll see good stuff, I'm not denying that. But this isn't really what gained the brand notoriety or represents its core values. ERD mainly gained popularity due to their controversial t-shirts. Personally, I believe if you want the authentic spirit of rebellion, I don't think buying an extremely overpriced Vivienne Westwood Seditionaries era t-shirt rip-off for the same price, if not more than an original Vivienne Westwood Seditionaries era t-shirt is the way to go. Better yet, you could probably make your own version for free or next to nothing.
Eu literalmente estou fazendo isso agora mesmo.
It's almost like there's a whole subculture based around this
Tá, não foi de
concept.
graça, eu tive que comprar
As much as
bermuda e os
shitting on
pants,
ERD is fun and a bit played out, and even though the core
A
theme of the
bermuda já
brand
tinha,
is
ela só tava
undeniably
estragando aqui dentro de
tacky
casa
and
mesmo.
cringe, in a very specific
Bom, na real, estragou por causa da
What does
academia,
it take
mas...
to lead in a world that never stands still? Not just to lead people, but the ideas that reshape society.
and abstract way, I can see it being kind of punk. Don't get me wrong, this guy is not an authentic punk in the way he desperately wants to be perceived, but to a degree, I can see the commitment to the contradictory theme of elitist punk in a way is a form of nonconformity. He knows it's in poor taste and he does it anyway, and it pisses people off. I know I've just contradicted a lot of what I just said about ERD, but that also illustrates the paradox of punk specifically in fashion and leaves us with a lot of questions which can apply to more than just the work of Henry Levi. What is punk in the context of fashion? Can you even uphold punk values while operating within the fashion industry? The fashion industry, at least in a mainstream context, does represent a lot of what punk values stand against. Trends breed conformity and the industry relies on trends to shift products. Elitism is massively present and there is also the whole capitalism element. But on the flip side, this creates an environment where a bigger impact is made when someone subverts this and does something more aligned with or inspired by punk. A lot of the most highly regarded designers of all time fall into the category of anti-fashion, which has a lot of parallels and crossover with punk on a fundamental level. This clearly signifies that going against the grain and being subversive is highly valued within the industry, which is obvious in a lot of ways. Everyone wants to be ahead of the curve, creating or wearing the next trend while it's fresh and innovative, but eventually that needs to be commodified and sold to a larger audience to make it worth chasing. I guess what I'm trying to say is that the fashion industry wants to be punk to move forward, but at the same time needs to also be and represent the complete opposite to survive. I'll give an example of this. Rei Kawakubo is considered to be one of the most innovative and creative fashion designers of all time. She went against the grain, threw out the rulebook, and did high fashion her own way with Comme des Garçons. Her brand is also responsible for one of the biggest symbols of modern mainstream conformity in fashion. The CDG play Converse, which is now ridiculed and memed with the perception that if you wore them, then you are a sheep to mainstream trends, aka conformity. The anti-fashion powerhouse Comme des Garçons needs the CDG play diffusion line, which targets a mainstream audience to survive and carry on creating the cool stuff. In a way, this concept also applies to the popularization of punk in general. Malcolm McLaren and Vivienne Westwood represented the punk ethos, but also used it to very cleverly market their products and then later launch Vivienne's career as a high fashion designer. Is that really that much different from what ERD is doing? It's all a big grey area, especially as Malcolm and Vivienne helped to pioneer punk while also representing what it stood against. That now leads us to the question, what really is punk and the true ethos behind it, and how does it apply to fashion? Bar Vivienne Westwood and I guess Henry Levi, pretty much all the designers I've mentioned in this video simply reference punk. This then opens up a conversation that is very present online at the moment, being aesthetics or cause versus actual subcultures. I will try not to get completely sidetracked by this separate can of worms, but I think it very much applies to the punk fashion conversation as, for the most part, it is being taken and used as an aesthetic. I fully understand why this makes people angry, as it is pretty much commodifying something that's meant to be totally against commodification. However, this leads to people, especially on the internet, saying stuff like, "This person isn't punk, you don't understand it, you need to give credit, you're not allowed to wear that," which inadvertently leads to this person positioning themselves as an authority on the matter and trying to implement rules. Isn't that totally against what punk is about too? It becomes clear that any attempt to intellectualize or definitively categorize what is and isn't punk just leads to contradictions. Still, I don't think this makes punk completely flawed as an ideal or concept. If anything, it represents the fact of life that nothing is either black or white. We do not live in a world of absolutes. everyone and everything is flawed in some way. Some people say punk is purely about nonconformity, but that gets muddied very quickly, as what represents nonconformity one day will be a mainstream trend the next. Obviously this is all just opinion based and up to personal interpretation, but I guess that is the point. Punk means different things to different people. To some it's purely just an aesthetic, while other people see it as a lifestyle. In my opinion, I think what is at the core of punk and what truly matters to the subculture and the things it's influenced is the DIY ethos. I'm not alone on this take. For example, my dad, who was a teenager in the UK at the time of the Sex Pistols and the rise of punk, says the most influential and inspiring thing about punk was it made the youth at the time realise that they didn't need permission to do what they wanted to do. If you wanted to start a band, you didn't need to be deemed profitable by a label. You just did it, and it didn't matter whether or not you knew what you were doing or if you could even play the instruments. You were a rebel by simply following your artistic desires and using whatever resources you could get your hands on. It doesn't matter how you did it or if it was shitty, it was the fact that you were passionate and you did it on your own terms. With this in mind, I want to conclude this video by talking about a designer who I personally think truly embodies punk while still operating within the high fashion industry. So let me introduce you to the fashion alchemist, Boris Bujon-Saberi. Born in Munich in 1978 to an Iranian father and a German mother, Boris has stated that due to his family's quote patchwork-like background, he never felt truly accepted into Bavaria's largely conservative community. You could say he grew up on the fringe of his community, which was further amplified by his alternative passions being skateboarding, climbing, hip-hop, and of course punk rock. Boris started making clothes at a young age. In an interview with Style Zeitgeist, he explains how at the age of 14, due to his skinny build, many of the clothes he bought did not fit him in the way he wanted, so he bought second-hand garments and transformed them. Eventually his friends asked him to make them clothes, to which he said no, as he only knew how to make clothes for his own body, and didn't even know where to start for someone else. Despite being formally trained in fashion later in his life, this style of what he calls 3D patterning, working straight on his own body, has remained central to his design process. I think once you've seen what Boris looks like and the types of cuts and silhouettes that he favours in his work, it all really makes sense. The clothes suit him a lot. His work obviously doesn't reference punk in the same way that the clothes by other designers in this video do. However, that's not to say there isn't any influence. He has stated that his clothes are informed by all his passions, with, for example, the skinny silhouettes coming from the punk look. He describes his niche as, quote, a generation of skate punk hip hop culture. This is interesting to me, as purely looking at his designs, his style could be described more as futuristic avant-garde with some techwear thrown in there. In fact, I think it's really hard to pin down a label, as it's such a unique mix of influences and experimentation. Boris's punk influence comes more in the form of how he works rather than being apparent in his designs through direct cultural references. In fact, in an interview with Subject Change, he said, "The DIY aspect of punk and hip hop, the sort of do not copy and be yourself, is something that is deeply ingrained in my way of thinking." Boris has found success with making clothes on his own terms, and part of this is rejecting mass production in favour of artisanal methods. At his Barcelona atelier, he employs around 30 people, with nearly all the clothes produced under the label being made on site. He believes it is deeply important to transmit the importance of handmade objects to a newer generation. Yes, his clothes are extremely expensive, but that's due to him paying his employees an ethical wage, with all the garments being handmade with complex and experimental production methods. For a bit of context, in his interview with Style Zeitgeist, he explained that while a lot of brands sell trousers for say €90, that's around the same price he pays someone to do just the stitching on a single pair of his trousers. Basically, he's not marking up his clothes for a ridiculous price while also getting sued for unethical working conditions like other designer brands such as Christian Dior, or just doing it for the sake of artificial scarcity. Boris Bujon-Saberi clearly embodies the punk DIY ethos and has found success and fulfillment in doing so while rejecting mainstream ideals like scaling the business to mass production for profit's sake, or presenting at Paris Fashion Week in favour of being able to produce an untainted and authentic manifestation of his vision through clothes. For me personally, I think he is the truest punk designer operating in the high fashion industry, but for you it could be someone completely different. Again, there is no one definition of punk, and this is all up to individual interpretation. That's the end of the video, goodbye.
Men would sooner put the round to the torch than see a woman ascend the iron throne.
Oh. Frank Miller.
I understand that creating comics isn't an easy process.
Esse cara aqui, que é o criador do Sin City. No Sin City, no Batman, o Retorno do Cavaleiro das Trevas da década de 80, ele desenha muito bem. Tipo, olha isso aqui. Isso aqui é lindo. Isso aqui é maravilhoso. Ele desenha muito bem o Demolidor e tal. Ó, arte incrível. Aí chegou num ponto na carreira dele que vira essa merda aqui. Essa bosta aqui, ó. Que vira essa bosta. O que vocês estão vendo? Porque se você dá uma olhada aqui, muito bem feito. Aí ele te entrega essa merda. Daí ele te entrega essa outra. Isso aqui. A arte digital pra ele foi o. Sei lá, um inferno. Ficou horrível. A arte dele após ele começar a usar ferramentas digitais, por exemplo. Essa aqui é a continuação do Cavaleiro das Trevas. Essa coisa horrorosa aqui. Olha isso, que horrível. É feio. Sério. E esse cara tem um problema que todo o rosto, todos os personagens parecem o mesmo rosto. Nessa fase aí. Aí você pega isso aqui, ó. Maravilhoso. O cara tinha que fazer mais coisas assim. Não o lixo que ele está fazendo. Isso aqui é horrível.
And that deadlines need to be met. But if a large corporation that specializes in graphic novels is making a graphic novel, then I would assume that the art would be good. You would think that comic book companies like Marvel and DC would only hire the most talented artists to handle their beloved IPs. But no. Like, I get that some artists aren't for everyone, but these works that I'm about to show you are genuinely awful. Like actually stinky. These are supposed to be...
Ah, pera aí. Acho que é esse aqui. Esse aqui é um dos piores desenhos já feitos na vida por uma pessoa. E por incrível que pareça, isso aqui foi feito pelo criador do Deadpool. O cara se inspirou nisso. Só que ficou horrível. E aí o cara foi e fez isso aqui, ó. E ficou muito bom.
be professionals. Yet I've seen better drawings on DeviantArt. This is possibly the worst Wolverine art I've ever seen in my entire life, and that's saying something, because Wolverine is supposed to be a short, ugly, hairy midget.
É, o Wolverine tem tipo, acho que... eu não lembro, acho que é 1,60 m. Pera aí. Um 1,60 m. Ele tem a altura do meu pai! Sério? Coisa.
Somehow he's made him look even worse.
Hey, who you calling ugly, bub?
Curtir 5 bloquinhos em um só dia é o jeito engove para sua curtição ser GG.
Oh, hey, listen, Wolverine. I thought you were supposed to be ugly, man. I didn't know you had... Damn. Whoa. Shit, man. Why does his cowl look like that? It looks like someone took their Batman cosplay and tried to turn it into a Wolverine mask. Why are his proportions like this? The funny thing is, this cover is so bad, it probably off-put a lot of people from actually reading the story, but the actual art inside of the book isn't even that bad. Speaking of terrible Wolverine art, we have Frank Miller. Where do I even begin here? This is...
Viu que eu falei?
Oh my god, what the... Wolverine's barber asked him what he wanted, and bro said, let me get the X-Men. Bro wanted to be an X-Men so bad that he gave himself the X-Men hairline. Like, I know I said Wolverine was supposed to be ugly, but he genuinely looks like a caveman here. Like, he looks pre-evolved. And that's not the only time Wolverine has looked pre-evolved, because in this next panel we have here, he looks like a T-Rex. What the fuck, man? How did this get passed? How was this published? They really saw
Como isso
this,
passou pelo controle de qualidade?
and they just went with it. Like, I can just imagine this version of Wolverine trying to do a stealth takedown, and it ends up failing because they felt Wolverine's hot breath on their neck before he was able to reach his arms far enough to stab them. Where the fuck do you think you're going, Frank? We're not done with you. If you thought that art by Frank Miller was terrible, it just gets worse.
What is that? Oh,
O melhor do mundo. O melhor do... Isso aqui não é o melhor do mundo. Isso aqui é o pior.
shit. What is that?
I'm just... I don't... This is quite possibly one of the worst covers, I think, ever. I don't think this will ever be topped. This is terrible. I'm just confused by the entirety of this. I don't understand. I don't understand the composition of it. I don't understand what it was trying to convey. I'm very confused. I don't know why they're facing butt to butt. The perspective here is weird because,
Fetiche do
if you're not paying
Frank Miller,
attention, it kind of looks like they're midgets, but in actuality, they're bending their knees. I'm assuming that's Superman. I don't know why Superman has purple leggings.
Não é o Super-Homem, acho que é Supergirl.
No cape and a ponytail. That is quite an interesting character design. You know, it's one thing to have terrible character design, but to also pair that with terrible artwork is very bold, I must say. Why does Wonder Woman have braids? I don't get that. She's rocking that weird white hippie girl hairstyle. She also has the manliest jawline I've ever seen in my entire life. I mean, that shit
O cara falou bosta, mas...
is like handsome Squidward. That shit looks enchanting, bro. She truly looks like she was chiseled by a god, because that jawline is insane. I'm glad that Superman doesn't have a cape on this cover so we could see how cheeked up he was. Yeah! Speaking of cheeked up, we have Greg Land, who is a questionable comic book artist. Now, at first glance, you may think, this is pretty good. You know, what's the problem here? Until you realize that this guy just traces and reuses the same shit. Like, this is literally
Não, entendi. Essa é a crítica.
the same thing
Achei que era o cara que faz umas artes meio esquisitas.
3 times. How does he keep getting away with it? All of these faces are the same. I don't know why
Ó, esse é outro que tem o problema de negar sempre o mesmo rosto.
everyone looks the same. Bro, come on, bro. Like, and for some reason, this guy loves to trace porn.
É o cara que eu tava pensando que era. Né? Eu não tinha pego para o nome, mas... Aqui, vamos voltar um pouco.
A questionable comic book artist. Now, at first glance, you may
Land. É.
think, this is pretty good. You know, what's the problem here? Until you realize that this guy just traces and reuses the same shit. Like, this is literally the same thing 3 times. How does he keep getting away with it? All of these faces are the same. I don't know why everyone looks the same. Bro, come on, bro. Like, and for some reason, this guy loves to trace porn. Now, Gwen, I don't think that...
Sério, eu tenho certeza que é o esquisito que eu tô pensando. Tá, não é exatamente o esquisito que eu tava pensando. Eu acho. Tá, talvez não seja esquisito especificamente que eu tava pensando. Tem um outro esquisitão que é essa coisa, cara, o desenho por cima de filmes pra maiores. Aqui a crítica que o cara fez, que o cara desenha sempre desenha a mesma coisa. Tá vendo? Ó.
That's an acceptable expression to have after realizing Spider-Man has died. I mean, that just looks like you're busting a nut. Yeah, that's totally not a suspicious face to be making. Interesting pose she's hitting here. That I wonder what he traced that from. This Iron Man panel is actually atrocious. It literally is just a straight rip of this fucking meme. I don't understand.
Meu Deus do céu. Artista fracassado.
Why he chose that as a reference to trace. Like, why does Iron Man have teeth? This is genuinely the most cursed Iron Man.
Ou por que de acha a máscara do Homem de Ferro tem rugas?
And panel.
O BTG como parceiro, como ele trata os clientes, porque é um exemplo, né, de fidelização.
But hey, you know, at least Greg Land can actually draw proportions correctly. Unlike Rob Liefeld. I mean, what the fuck is this? I'm sure a lot of people have seen this infamous picture of Captain America.
Mas assim, isso aí foi um erro que ele cometeu. Depois ele melhorou depois, ó, com o Deadpool.
How do you fuck up the proportions that badly? Have you never seen a human being before in your life? Super soldier program, more like super steroid program. Holy fucking shit, dude.
Bro looks se inspirou no Arnold Schwarzenegger. Com certeza era super esteroides.
Like he invented the bench press. I like how he has such a protruding chest and absolutely no lower bulge, insinuating that his nuts have shriveled up to dust because of his repeated steroid abuse. Nah, this dude genuinely cannot draw anatomy correctly. It's like
Meu Deus do céu, que coisa horrível.
He's allergic to it or something. Someone call a chiropractor. Nah, what, bro, what the? She's like 8 feet tall with the...
Meu Deus. Não, o corpo dela é assim, ó. Parte de cima do corpo. Perna.
Just her legs alone. The arm to leg ratio is insane. If she ever needs to tie her shoes, she's cooked. He's also physically unable to draw feet for some reason. Now let's take a look at some Spider-Man art. Everyone loves Spider-Man so much. I mean, he's like their best-selling property. Surely they wouldn't have a terrible artist make art. Fucking John Romita Jr. God damn it. What is this, bro?
Yeah.
Why? How are your legs making a U shape? I don't understand. What is going on here? It looks like he has no neck, like his head is just fused to his body. But if you thought this was acceptable, wait until I hit you with the Peter Parker face. Cause holy shit, this is so bad. Oh my, what the hell? What happened here?
What?
Please kill me now. My existence is pain.
He didn't always used to be this bad at drawing, cause look at this.
Hey, that's pretty good.
What the fuck happened, man? Did you fall on your head and lose your art abilities? Please, someone take away John Romita Jr.'s cooking privileges. What the hell is this Superman? He looks like he's speeding home because he has to take a fat shit. What the hell is that facial expression, bro? But if you thought that Peter Parker face was horrendous, let me introduce you to Humberto Ramos.
Brother,
Why does he draw
Pode ser questão assim, só de estilo do cara.
like this?
Não tá
Someone
exatamente.
helps
Eu retiro tudo que eu disse, esse cara desenha mal pra caralho.
Spider-Man. It looks like he's been stung by 5 million bees. You know the artwork is good when the dude who's wearing a mask has the same facial proportions as the dude who's not wearing a mask. I mean, dear God, why are his eyes so tiny? And why is his face so inflated. Never let this guy draw faces ever again, because for some reason he can't draw faces unless it's a woman. And we're back at it with the terrible Wolverine art. He just can't catch a break. His neck is so long. Buddy is built like an uncircumcised penis. And if you wanted to see more horrifying faces, I present to you Zachary Baldus's artwork. And this is supposed to be magic. Yes, those are supposed to be the same character. This art style is so weird. Like, everyone is lanky and flat looking. But then he also drew this Kitty Pryde, which definitely looks a lot better, but also looks like she skips leg day like it's the plague. These comic book artists are about as consistent as Klay Thompson. Last but not least, we have Injustice Batman.
I'll be crying if I look like that too, bro. That's fucked up what they be doing.
Horrível.
This
Não, sério.
He looks like he has Down syndrome.
Sério, sem zoeira. O cara que desenhou... O cara que desenhou o negócio tá aqui no canto da tela. Que tá aqui assim por aqui. Desenha melhor que esse cara.
I mean, like, why does Catwoman
look
look normal?
Aborto das
looks like
utopias.
that. This shit was so bad. They had to republish it, and you know, this looks way closer to what I imagine was envisioned. So I don't know who cooked over here, but they fucking burnt the kitchen. So yeah, that was some of the worst comic book art I have ever laid my eyes upon. I genuinely don't know how some of those were approved. Join my Discord if you haven't already, link in the description, and check out my second channel where I open Pokemon cards. Oh yeah, and follow me on Twitch. But yeah, I'll see you later.
Não mostrou o esquisito que eu tava pensando que ia mostrar. E eu não irei mostrar porque o vídeo pode ser pode cair. Não tem monetização. Só agora que eu pensei que eu abri a imagem aqui. Com isso aqui cobrindo metade da tela. Parte da tela. Caralho. Eu sou burro. Isso aqui não é nenhuma novidade.
Considering its impact, it's hard to believe the last Shrek movie came out well over a decade ago. Somehow, this iconic saga of films has avoided becoming some estranged, faded memory of the 2000s and actually managed to stay culturally relevant years later. What kept it going? Was it the endless memes, the spin-offs? Was it Al Pacino's phone case at a dinner party?
It was a gift. It was a gift from my daughter.
Whatever the reason, it's clear that something about the franchise resonates with us on a deep cultural level. So much so that the Library of Congress actually inducted the first Shrek film into the National Film Registry, an honor reserved only for films that prove to have a, quote, historical, cultural, or aesthetic significance. And in a lot of ways, it was rightly earned. Shrek was a clever, satirical jab at the last 60 years of fairy tale style animation, with a general appeal that managed to charm audiences young and old. That's what ultimately made the movie an instant classic, and unarguably a smash hit. Little did we know that DreamWorks would leverage this position with one of the most obnoxiously aggressive marketing campaigns of the last 50 years. For over a decade, DreamWorks would put Shrek on almost every product imaginable, and one way or another, we eventually all bought in. By Shrek 3, it was practically a part of everyday life. One day we all just rubbed our eyes and realized we were bathing with Shrek shampoo and eating green ketchup. And it wasn't even our fault. As part of their marketing efforts, DreamWorks had made it their sole initiative to have a tie-in product with almost every major brand on the planet. It was virtually unavoidable, and depending on where you were in the world, those product tie-ins could get very, very weird. So today, we're taking a break from the deep dives to look at some of the weirdest Shrek-themed products that DreamWorks ever licensed. Some good, some bad, and some deadly for some reason. And unsurprisingly, many of those products were snacks, primarily targeted towards children. In a lot of ways, the 2000s kind of felt like an Area 51-style testing grounds for children's food products. You had a lot of shameless use of artificial coloring, 14-syllable ingredients, dunkables, dippables, whatever this is, and a whole lot of other offenses. And it's not to say that these foods aren't still prevalent today, but we're talking about a time when a much larger portion of parents were less concerned with nutrition and more concerned with getting kids to just shut up and eat. And this kind of ignorance gave companies a lot more room for experimentation. Now, when it came to Shrek-themed food products, that was no exception. In 2000, Heinz took a look at a chart and realized that roughly half of ketchup consumers were children. And since it takes a grown-up to realize that ketchup is a C-tier sauce at best, they inevitably tried to find more ways to appeal to kids. In their efforts, Heinz pushed their R&D department to the forefront of ketchup technology, re-engineering their formula to produce an artificially colored ketchup in a myriad of different colors. And it just so happened that a year later, the first Shrek movie came out. So, Heinz performed the intellectual equivalent of banging two rocks together and marketed their green ketchup as Shrek Ketchup. Shrek-up. And for those of us old enough to remember, Heinz colored ketchup was a total hit, making quite a respectable 6-year run from 2000 to 2006. Unfortunately, toward the end of the product's life cycle, parents were starting to get a little suspicious about the product's ingredients. And rightfully so. Turns out Heinz had chemically re-engineered their ketchup to the point where they legally could not call the product tomato ketchup. Maybe in hindsight, releasing mystery color wasn't such a good idea. Apparently TV dinners aren't so depressing when you're a kid, which is probably why kid cuisine was so popular. Just by looking at the boxes, kid cuisine appears to hold the record for having the highest amount of unidentifiable substances in its frozen meals, which is a record no food product should ever have. And apparently, the Shrek-themed dinners were no exception. Originally advertised for Shrek 2, these meals included Shrek-shaped nuggets, Shrek-shaped mac and cheese, and the ever-infamous swamp pudding, which advertised the ability to turn your tongue green. This marketing gimmick would go on to be mimicked by countless other products throughout the decade, and in my opinion, really exhausted itself by the time we got to Shrek Cheetos. Later on in 2010, Kid Cuisine would bring back the tie-in to promote Shrek Forever After, this time with a contest. That's right, if you were one of the lucky few to pull the coveted green tray from specially marked packages, you were granted the chance to win a trip to Universal Studios to meet Shrek, who, at least for a time, was still kind of a work in progress. So what's Kid Cuisine up to today? Any new products? Exciting new partnerships? Nope. From one look at their website, it barely looks like their menu's changed. In fact, the company's never even made an effort to branch out with their meal items or provide healthier alternatives. But can we really expect much from a company that once advertised color-changing dessert as an attractive selling point? I don't think so. For the entirety of the decade, Shrek's main marketing ploy was green-colored everything. Green ketchup, green tongues, green popcorn, green cream. It had kind of gotten out of hand. But when it came to this marketing tactic, no other product curdles the tongue more than Nesquik's limited edition swamp-flavored syrup. And no, that's not a joke. This Spanish label directly translates to swamp flavor, but apparently the actual taste was more akin to sour apple. From what I can tell, this product was widely sold throughout South America and Europe, but all I could really find were Eastern European commercials from 2004. So if you've ever wanted to hear a Hungarian voice actor literally moaning for swamp milk, well, look no further. As much as I want to hate this product, I very well may be in the minority, as it appears as though a petition has been created to actually bring this stuff back. Oh, and they're like super close to reaching their goal, so if any of you want to be the change you wish to see in the world, I've gone ahead and linked the petition down below. That's it.
Epocler, 2 vezes mais potente que a concorrência. Epocler, seu fígado sente a diferença.
Com Nescau Cereal, você começa o dia do seu jeito.
Shrek Twinkies, or Shrinkies, were a Hostess tie-in product that was released exclusively for Shrek 2 and Shrek Forever After, boasting the same great Twinkie taste but with a Shrek-colored cream filling. This is just another product in a long line of Shrek-themed foods that oddly appears to contain some sort of preserved Shrek essence, and it is a trend I am all too glad has come and gone. And it seems I'm not alone in thinking this. In a presentation to the United States Senate, Senator Tom Harkin of Iowa also voices his distaste for Shrek Twinkies in what may be one of the funniest 2 minutes in American politics.
Many, as I said, advertisements for junk food snacks use characters popular with children. Here's Shrek advertising Twinkies. I kind of like Shrek. And now using Shrek to poison our kids. Twinkies. Green Twinkies with a green filling in it. Nutritional value, 0. Shrek now becomes a bad guy. Kids see Shrek and they like Shrek. They saw the movie. Shrek has a powerful appeal to kids' minds. I kind of like Shrek.
In order to promote Shrek 4 in 2010, McDonald's would offer Shrek-themed drinking glasses for $2 a piece alongside any order. The glasses featured all the characters we knew and loved. One for Donkey, Fiona, Shrek, and Puss in Boots. And strangely enough, this glass, yes, this specific glass, ended up costing McDonald's millions. Turns out, some of the designs on the glasses contained high traces of cadmium, a chemical that, in high enough concentration, is basically poison. And thanks to an overly informative article covering the controversy, I now know way too much about cadmium. Essentially, this chemical is commonly used as a pigment for coloring glassware, and is pivotal in producing the colors orange and yellow. This is where Puss in Boots comes in. Since the color of the character was primarily orange, the cup would end up wildly exceeding the FDA's pre-approved limit for cadmium. So McDonald's took the proactive approach and recalled every single glass. In an effort to round up as many as possible, the company offered to buy back customers' glasses for $3 each, and since they were originally sold for $2, consumers could actually turn a profit. Of course, McDonald's would lose money in the process, but as far as they were concerned, it was a much better option than a class action lawsuit. In the end, the company ended up recalling over 12 million cups, losing millions of dollars in the process. Considering the events, some might actually applaud McDonald's for their proactive response, but don't be fooled. This is the same company that got excited about putting cartoon ears on minimum wage workers, and it does not get more evil than that. It seems like when it comes to Shrek marketing flops, no other sequel had it worse than Shrek Forever After. Along with the glassware scare, the film also received backlash when DreamWorks greenlit a promotional partnership with a men's fashion magazine. V-Man, the publication in question, decided to use Shrek's creative license by superimposing the film's characters into racy photo shoots alongside suggestively clothed models, resulting in one of the most tasteless and awkward marketing campaigns I have ever seen. I mean, look at this. Not even Shrek wants to be there. Of course, V-Man's attempts to market the movie to adults fell on deaf ears, and DreamWorks issued a public statement regretting the partnership. Ouch. The first honorable mention in the world of Shrek-themed marketing goes to Vidalia onions. In this day and age, there really aren't many clever ways to increase the sale of onions. There's really not much to them. But Vidalia got creative and partnered with DreamWorks in 2010 to promote just that, onions. And by God, it worked. Turns out an easy way to increase sales by over 30% is to stick a...
Já volto.
cardboard cutout of Shrek in front of your product, and that's exactly what Vidalia did. Seems like as long as Shrek was on the cover, kids were interested, and sales of Vidalia onions inevitably skyrocketed. Is this kind of a testament to the manipulative marketing power of child mascots? Probably, but at least in this case it wasn't Twinkies.
Toda a Terra-média conhece a história da Guerra do Anel, mas
Depois, vou assistir. Desculpa.
Throughout Shrek's 10-year marketing run, McDonald's would produce countless Happy Meals, toys, and specialty menu items to promote Shrek movies. But no item came close to being as weird as the Shrek Ravioli Dippers. Exclusively sold in Australia, this pasta-based menu item was served as a limited-time meal to promote Shrek the Third. Of course, the reason it comes across as so bizarre is because it bears absolutely no resemblance to any specific food at all. I mean, the Shrek-shaped ravioli barely looks like pasta, and for some reason it's meant to be eaten with tongs? This Shrek Boyardee is just another of McDonald's numerous attempts at trying to put pasta on the menu, which is something they literally can't stop trying for some reason. As for me, I'll just stick with my Shrek shaken fries, thanks. In 2004, NASCAR legends Tony Stewart and Bobby Labonte would make DreamWorks history when they sported custom Shrek 2 liveries on their cars in 2004. And while these paint schemes made impressive display pieces in die-cast form, nothing came quite as close to the legendary collectability of the action figures. That's right, these were actually made for some reason, and to this day the target demographic eludes me. But in a sport where sponsorships are practically ingrained into the lifeblood of the sport itself, it doesn't surprise me that people bought these things. I mean, this is the same organization that sold an entire night of racing to a children's movie.
TNT Sports presents the SpongeBob SquarePants Movie 300.
I think we can all agree that when it came to movie marketing, Shrek was an absolute force that was rivaled by very few films in terms of sheer marketing power. To this day, the level of cultural virality that the franchise still maintains is actually quite impressive, considering the last movie came out over a decade ago. And now, with rumors of a fifth Shrek installment finally in the works, there won't be much we can do when advertisers once again start seeing green. Thanks for watching. This video is sponsored by Surfshark. In 1977, virtually no one anticipated Star Wars to be a hit. Not the studios, not the toy companies, heck, not even George Lucas. That's why the movie was written with such conclusion. He just simply didn't think there was ever going to be a sequel. When Star Wars eventually released in May of that year, the film was only screening in 32 theaters across the US, and the merchandise made to promote the movie was just as underwhelming.
We'll be seeing them in the shape of orange-flavored marshmallows, bubble bath here with galactic bubbles, and the soaps in different characters.
With expectations set remarkably low, 20th Century Fox was bracing themselves for a complete and utter box office bomb. But then, something amazing happened.
The attendance at Star Wars has been almost astronomical.
Already, it's the biggest box office hit in cinema history.
I think this is going to be a science fiction classic.
The moviegoers wait for 6 hours or more.
In London, after a month, almost 600,000 flocked to see the film, an all-time record.
Turns out, Star Wars was a smash hit. The film was considered to be a breath of fresh air for the box office, with its themes of wonder and sci-fi escapism capturing the imaginations of anyone and everyone, including boys, girls, and even male nerds in their 20s.
On your cell phone.
It was an unexpected but pleasant surprise, which gave companies the green light to produce all kinds of Star Wars products and media for the next 46 years. The stats don't lie. Just take a look at the official Star Wars wiki and you'll soon realize that there has not been a single year since its inception where a book, show, Christmas album, or toy hasn't.
Ou filme especial de Natal. A gente poderia assistir essa porcaria um dia. Esse seria, tipo... Sério, o filme é horrível.
Been released. The official numbers are hard to confirm, but according to publicly available data, Star Wars is the third highest grossing media franchise under Mickey Mouse and Pokemon, with an estimated $51.8 billion in total global revenue. and amazingly, 29 billion of that was garnered through merch. So, with these numbers in mind, we can only conclude that, at least from a marketing standpoint, Star Wars is at its core a merchandise business. But this explanation will never justify the Jar Jar Binks lollipop, the Kylo Ren garden salad, or the Star Wars alien specifically designed to sell Pepsi. It got bad, okay? So today, we're taking a look back at some of the strangest marketing moves the Star Wars franchise has ever made, from regrettable toys to painfully bad marketing mascots. So, sit back and enjoy. And what better way to do that than with a nice cool glass of blue milk. Cheers.
Quando você conecta seu alarme Verisure, sua casa fica protegida contra roubo. Protegemos todos os acessos à sua casa, com sensores avançados em portas e janelas para detectar o ladrão antes que ele entre. E em caso de intrusão, respondemos dentro de 60 segundos. Em nossa central de monitoramento, capturamos imagens do intruso e notificamos a polícia. Confie nos especialistas em segurança. Alarmes Verisure, número 1 na América Latina.
Espetáculo que realmente importa.
In 1976, American toy company Mego committed corporate seppuku when executives rejected the Star Wars license, leaving rival company Kenner Toys to pick up the rights. The only problem? The timing was a little tight. By the time Kenner had signed off on all the paperwork, the first movie was less than a year away from hitting screens, and developing a toy line can often take multiple years, especially when dealing with a licensed property. There was simply no way Kenner would have toys out by the time the movie released in May of '77, and according to their projections, they weren't even going to have the toys ready for Christmas. In the meantime, Kenner would fill the empty shelf space with all sorts of junk, ranging from half-baked board games to puzzles to even just label-swapping pre-existing toys with Star Wars imagery. Anything to try and buy time and revenue before the release of the action figures. But with December fast approaching, the hype for Star Wars had only grown, and Kenner was starting to realize just how much revenue they were going to lose during the holidays. Imagine sitting on a piece of intellectual property worth millions, with people begging you to take their money, but you have nothing to give them. It's practically a capitalist's worst nightmare. So, a plan was hatched. A desperate plan, but a plan nonetheless. But before we get to that, here's a message from today's sponsor, Surfshark. Contrary to popular belief, Surfshark has nothing to do with surfing or sharks. And while I personally believe that this is a missed opportunity, I'm willing to let it slide, because this is a killer app. With regular browsing, you're basically leaving a breadcrumb trail of data on every link you click and every video you watch. But with Surfshark, your data's encrypted, meaning the shameful burdens of your search history fall solely on you. Using the link in my description, you can get 3 months of Surfshark completely free. They even offer a 30-day money-back guarantee, so you can try it without any risk to your wallet. Just visit the link in my description to get started with Surfshark today. Just a few months before Christmas, Kenner would launch a commercial for the Star Wars Early Bird toy set, which was essentially just an empty piece of cardboard with an IOU inside.
Chewbacca, Luke, and Princess Leia. They're the Star Wars Early Bird set of figures.
The plan was to have kids purchase the package, fill out the form inside, and mail it off to Kenner. And in the next 2 to 6 months, they would hopefully receive a set of 4 new Star Wars action figures. Now, just to be clear, this wasn't some old, tried-and-true marketing tactic from the 70s. This was completely unprecedented then, and it still is now. I mean, the whole idea meant kids would wake up Christmas morning to find a literal piece of cardboard under the tree, only to be told they'd have to wait halfway until next Christmas to get their gift. The idea was bold and kind of greedy, but it worked. Turns out fans were so excited for these toys that they were willing to wait, and Kenner ended up selling hundreds of thousands of these things. Better yet, the toys were delivered on time without any major recorded hiccups. Sure, Luke's lightsaber made absolutely no sense, but apart from that, the toys were great quality. Now, we may look back at the idea of selling a piece of cardboard to children as kind of an ethical no-no, but have things really changed much? Today, people are still more than happy to fork over their hard-earned money for early access video games, pre-orders, and crowd-funded projects, so it's hard to criticize Kenner too much. Except for when they released the Uncle Owen and Aunt Beru action figures, that was kind of deserved. Okay, fast forward to 1999. The first Star Wars prequel is just about to be released, and Pepsi is at the forefront of the marketing campaign. Having secured a $2 billion deal in 1996, Pepsi was positioned comfortably as the #1 brand partnered with the movie of the decade. And needless to say, they were over the moon of Endor. No, but you could tell Pepsi was pretty hyped, and this led their marketing team to come up with a fairly ambitious plan for the summer of '99. That year, Pepsi would use a mascot to promote their tie-in with Star Wars, and instead of using a character from the actual canon, they somehow got the green light to design their very own Star Wars alien.
I got a bad feeling about this.
The character's name is Marfalump, which admittedly sounds a whole lot more Dr. Seuss than Star Wars, but whatever. The point is, Pepsi had really high hopes for this guy. Like, really high. And their optimism led them to make an entire mini documentary on their creative process, which, in terms of content, is, quite frankly, an absolute goldmine.
The power of the Marfalump idea is it's one simple idea. It's not about Pepsi or Star Wars, it's about a character that loves both.
Okay, so here we get our first bit of insight into the creative genius behind the lump. You see, the partnership is about Star Wars and Pepsi. So what if the character loved Star Wars and Pepsi? Look, I'm not asking for an emotionally complex three-dimensional character here, but this sounds like the entire backstory was hashed out in a 15-minute boardroom meeting. You guys remember Pepsi Man? Pepsi Man never said a word and still somehow managed to have substantially more character depth than Marfalump. But according to the creators, Marf was the perfect marriage between the two brands, and their excitement was palpable.
Star Wars and Pepsi have a very close association, and we wanted to create a character that can show the fun of Star Wars and the fun of drinking Pepsi all in one.
Wow, he literally just described their partnership with the language of a 4th grade English assignment. It's like they don't even know what makes both these brands so great. Is drinking soda even fun? Is that something people say? Am I having fun right now? I don't know. Okay, maybe I'm going a little too hard on Pepsi, but look at it this way. Marketing 101 tells us that any good brand should have a story to tell, and it kind of feels like Pepsi didn't know what they were trying to communicate with this campaign.
He's our connection. He's the connection between that fantasy that George Lucas is creating and that people are just going to have a blast with this summer, and Pepsi.
There's also the issue of the character's design. In a lot of ways, Marfalump kind of feels like a parody of Star Wars fans. According to the commercials, he lives in his parents' basement, is seemingly overweight, and is addicted to Pepsi products.
He holds the Pepsi cans mostly in his upper arms because his fingers have been designed to do that kind of action.
Wait, did they just imply that Marfalump's hands were specifically engineered to hold Pepsi? He even wears a stained Star Wars t-shirt that's 2 sizes too small, which kind of gives the implication that he's a bit of a man-child. In a lot of ways, Pepsi was unintentionally roasting Star Wars fans, but in their eyes, Marfalump was their ticket, and you could tell by the way executives spoke that they were looking for a pretty big payout with this new campaign.
We're looking for magic this summer, and we're gonna get it.
Whoa, the corporate facade has been lifted. That lady just said in so many words that this thing damn better make money or someone's gonna pay, and frankly, I believe her. Then the promotion launches and Pepsi goes in guns blazing with an ad that features an X-Wing blowing up a Death Star made to look like the Coca-Cola logo. As for the actual ads, there were 3 separate commercials that aired during the summer of '99, each featuring Marfalump's crazy antics and ever so infectious catchphrase of "Oh joy, oh joy, oh joy." But it's kind of debatable as to whether or not Marfalump really resonated with audiences. The character didn't last longer than a year, and while that may have been Pepsi's intention, their excitement for the mascot kind of made you think they were hoping for a longer run. Today, Star Wars fans have almost completely forgotten about the Marf, and it's very possible that they're quite happy pretending it just never happened. But some have tried to keep the memory alive. On r/Marfalump, a whopping 10 users are still trying to keep the fandom going, discussing Marf theories, quoting lines, and just plain talkin' Marf. Or not. But if it just so happens that we never see Marf again, please join me in raising one last Pepsi to the embodiment of joy himself, Marfalump. Okay, can I have a Coke now? Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Vai de InDrive, define valor.
O motorista parceiro aceita.
InDrive, preço justo, jogo justo.
Neve Supreme, o conforto da folha tripla com textura acolchoada 3D. Cuidado e maciez inconfundíveis.
In 1990, the Star Wars franchise was in an awkward limbo. At this point, the last movie had come out 7 years ago, and there was still no word of when production would begin for the new films. Of course, Star Wars media and material was still being produced, and the franchise had maintained popularity, but the push for advertising new products wasn't as demanding as it was in the 70s and 80s. This would lead a small Italian toothpaste company to take a seemingly bold risk in regards to their advertising efforts. In 1990, the company Iyoda-san would release 2 separate commercials featuring Star Wars characters in their advertisements, and to this day, it's very debatable as to whether or not this was actually done legally. Sure, in the commercials, Darth Vader looks pretty convincing, but look closely at their lightsabers. For some reason, they start out white and then just keep changing color throughout the commercial. I think Darth Vader is supposed to represent plaque buildup, and the guy playing Luke is supposed to be fighting it off with a toothpaste lightsaber. I don't know, the whole thing is in Italian, so I'm probably lacking context, but most licensees have very specific guidelines when portraying their intellectual property. It just seems unlikely that they would allow for such creative liberties like this to be taken. But even with all things considered, I'm gonna give Iyoda-san the benefit of the doubt. It's very possible that during the early 90s, Star Wars was just cheaper to license due to its waning relevancy, and this commercial may have just been able to slip through the cracks in regards to quality control. But had this been Disney, who acquired the Star Wars license in 2012, I'd imagine the situation would have turned out a little differently. Throughout the almost 50 years of Star Wars merchandising, the lightsaber has easily been one of the most coveted children's toys to grace store shelves. It's a timeless classic, and my audience even placed it in S tier when compiling our toy tier list on stream. But the product hasn't always been perfect. From early on, the lightsaber proved to be somewhat of a challenge with regards to child safety and its actual engineering. The first rendition, released in 1977, was basically just a blow-up balloon with a light bulb inside.
It's the new Star Wars lightsaber from Kenner. Inflation required, batteries not included.
It was also a little flimsier than it should have been, and kinda looked more like you were swinging around a giant inflatable condom. I mean, look at this photo. How do you get excited for something like this out of the box? Needless to say, it was a design that hadn't yet refined all the features that would eventually make the toy great. In fact, it kind of lacked all of them. Different colored swords? Nope. Epic duels with buddies? Nope. Eye-watering knuckle busters? No, no, no. Now, as much as I'd like to say this toy got better in the 80s, it may have arguably gotten worse. A few years later, another rendition would hit shelves, this time with the familiar hard plastic design. But the actual saber was about the length of a popsicle. I mean, look at this picture. That's not the lightsaber in the process of extending. That's literally it. This fiasco of almost getting lightsabers right would continue for way too long, until about 1996, when Hasbro arguably perfected it. This version was the epitome of what a toy lightsaber should be. It was over 3 feet long, had lights and sounds, and extended with the push of a button. Apart from being able to take your hand off, it was pretty much the real deal. From there, we'd continue to get film-accurate, extendable lightsabers well into the 2000s. It was the golden age, until Hasbro eventually got bored and started innovating. From what I can tell, the first offense began in 2015, when Hasbro released the Star Wars Blade Builders Collection. It seems like the idea here was to give children the ability to customize their own lightsabers with infinite attachments and possibilities, which means the Star Wars nerd in me is seething. I mean, I'm not going to even bother mentioning the complete disregard for the actual canon. Just look at this. Half of these abominations don't even make any practical sense. It's like they just cherry-picked the word fun from functionality and threw out the rest. Look at this guy. Imagine pulling up to the next Jedi Temple meeting with that thing. There's no coming back from that. Not to mention, I don't even know which way you're supposed to hold some of these. But of course, at the end of the day, I am just a grown man getting angry at a kid's toy for failing to abide by the imaginary rules that exist within a fictional universe. Besides, according to reviews on Amazon, kids absolutely love these toys, so you win, Hasbro. Once again, I am but the fool. Another weird innovation was the Star Wars Scream Saber, which allowed kids to record a clip of their voice and play it back through the lightsaber. I guess Hasbro thought this was just a silly idea that would have kids doing Chewbacca impressions, but I think literally everyone else had other ideas.
After the beep, say something loud.
I'm gay.
I'm gay. I'm gay. I'm gay. I'm gay.
I mean, in what world did Hasbro ever expect kids to use this appropriately? The first time I saw it on shelves, I was overwhelmed with the possibilities, and not one idea could I share without getting age restricted. But, thankfully, nowadays it seems like Hasbro is kind of coming back to its roots and producing much simpler lightsabers with less bells and whistles. One of the latest releases, called Lightsaber Academy, looks pretty promising. Let's just hope you don't have to connect to Wi-Fi or something to use it.
Enter the Lightsaber Academy app on your device and sync your lightsaber.
God damn.
Que bosta.
Proteja sua casa com o alarme Verisuri, com gravação de imagens e notificação policial.
Arma que fazia piu 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 piu.
Totalmente diferente de tudo que eu tinha visto.
Eu não esperava que fosse tão emocionante.
Throughout the countless number of Star Wars movies, video games, and TV shows, we are almost always met with brand new characters to help tell each story. It's a big galaxy out there, and with new adventures comes new characters the franchise can introduce, and, in some cases, profit off of. As we already learned, merchandising is the core source of revenue for the Star Wars franchise. and it's usually the fan favorites that make the most bucks. Now, that's not to say that Star Wars is creating certain characters solely for the purpose of merchandising, but it couldn't have been too far in the back of their minds. The first possible evidence of this can be traced back to the original trilogy, specifically Return of the Jedi. In the movie, it was originally the Wookiees that were supposed to defend their homeworld from the Empire, but this was later changed to be the Ewoks, which were just a more cute and cuddly version of their original choice. Now, there are convincing reasons to suggest that this was purely a creative decision, but then we got an Ewok TV show and merchandise, so you be the judge. Another character that proved to be a hit with audiences was Darth Maul, whose edgy red-on-black character design and novel two-bladed lightsaber were a first for the franchise. Maul was a Sith Lord for the new millennia, and in 1999 he was the must-have toy for Star Wars fans.
What are you looking for?
Darth Maul.
Darth Maul.
Darth Maul.
Darth Maul, baby. Darth Maul.
Star Wars figures. You gotta have them, they're coming out.
Darth Maul was the literal poster boy for the entire Phantom Menace toy line, and this had manufacturers plastering him on every single action figure they produced. Want a Padme figure? Darth Maul. Qui-Gon Jinn? Darth Maul. Darth Maul? Darth Maul! But out of all the merch-friendly characters in the Star Wars universe, only one has managed to take the crown above all others. And it doesn't even come close. In 2019, with the release of The Mandalorian, audiences would be introduced to Grogu, aka the child, aka Baby Yoda. And it was love at first sight. Within weeks, Grogu had achieved the minion effect. There were toys, memes, book bags, mugs, keychains. Heck, I haven't even checked if there's a Grogu keychain. I just know that when I edit this video, I'll find one. Now, there's no denying that Grogu has the cuteness factor, which is a trait that has definitely granted him widespread consumer appeal. In fact, this popularity may have crowned him as the new King of the Mall. That's right, move over, Jack Skellington. Get out of here, Invader Zim. It seems like Grogu is now officially the hottest topic. Thank you. Needless to say, Grogu was a grand slam for Disney. Reports show that by 2020, Grogu merchandise had increased toy revenue for Star Wars by 70%. And that's barely scratching the surface of this craze. Baby Yoda was a cultural phenomenon, offline and online. Which reminds me about the memes.
Oh my god, the memes.
At the height of Grogu's popularity, it seemed like any conceivable idea was being communicated in the form of a Baby Yoda meme. For example, how about these super relatable memes from r/Jeep memes, with hits like my face when asking the wife for money to buy Jeep parts, or my face when I'm in my Jeep and I see a mud hole. It was like a mass psychosis. I once saw a man who was built like a professional wrestler wearing a Baby Yoda When the Beat Drops t-shirt. Oh, and another thing. Liking Baby Yoda is not a personality. Can you tell I feel strongly about this one? I don't know what it is, but it's something about cute characters being used as cash cows that just immediately ruins their charm for me. But for superfans, it seems like they can justify pretty much any purchase with one simple word.
Super cute.
The bag is cute.
Super cute. So freaking cute.
How adorable is that?
Listen, I understand this is a me problem, and for some, this level of cynicism towards a fictional character might be a bit of a turnoff. But I just can't hide it anymore. I don't like Baby Yoda. But I also don't like being close-minded. So I reached out to my good friend Nick in the hopes that he might be able to change my opinion. You see, Nick and I may share a name, but our opinions on Baby Yoda are quite conflicting. I kinda get the feeling that Nick has some sort of paternal affection for Baby Yoda.
Tchau.